Hi, so this is going to be the second video I'm making about Mormonism and why I'm currently leaving the Mormon Church. Again, I want to reemphasize that I don't know for sure that the Mormon Church is false. Like, I'm not trying to say that or fight the prophets or find fault. But there's questions that I've had for 10 years, and people always tell me put it on the shelf, put it on the shelf, and I did. But at some point in time, it has to come off the shelf because I've never found answers for a lot of the doubts I have. And so I kind of just want to halfway kind of explain to friends and family why I'm leaving, and that just not that because I'm sinning too much or more than I was when I was Mormon. And half of it is just that I want to kind of process in my own mind the things that I've been thinking and that have been going through my mind for the last 10 years. And I've heard a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but a couple people have set out to disprove Christianity and then end up being Christians. And so I'm kind of just putting Mormonism to the test in the same way, and just going through making a case against it, and then finding evidence both ways. Hopefully, we'll see. I don't know. I just want answers, I guess. So one of the things the Book of Mormon actually says to put to the test is to pray about the Book of Mormon being true or not true. And that's one thing. When I was Mormon, I would tell my Christian friends and the people who didn't believe in Mormonism, just pray about it. Trust God. Trust that God has the ability to answer you one way or another. If it's false, trust that He's going to tell you that it's false. If it's true, trust that He's going to tell you it's true. And at the time, of course, I was Mormon, so I was of course He's going to tell me it's true. That's the only reason it's true. But I had never gotten that answer to prayers. I was basing my faith on other people that I trusted. So basing my faith on man and good men. I love my Mormon friends. I think that they're fantastic people. I think they're better people than I will ever be. But that's not enough to join a religion or base your whole life and base your faith on something. So I would pray, and I never got an answer. But I would always just think well, eventually the answer will come. If I'm more righteous or whatever the thing is, the answer will come. But the thing is, so I think it's in Doctrine and Covenants, it talks about whenever you get the answer and it's correct or it's of God, or the answer is yes, basically, you feel the burning in your bosom, and when it's no, you stupor a thought. So when I would pray about it, I would get this stupor a thought, but I would always be I'm gonna wait, and then looking back, I'm that was probably an answer. That was probably a no. I just didn't like it. I just didn't want to hear it, because I don't think that this is biblical to that answer to prayer. I don't think that is biblical. But if I was God and that's how somebody was expecting me to answer, and one of my children were asking a question that important, I would answer it in a way that they could understand. And so I think I got an answer to a prayer, and it was no, and I ignored it. And I was talking to some missionaries the other day, accidentally, but they were talking about one of the kids. He was 19 years old, and he's I didn't get an answer for 19 years. And it's kind of the same thing. I wonder how many people prayed genuinely and God answered them no, and they weren't willing to accept it, because he had kind of had the same thing. His mom was Mormon, and he went off of her faith and was no, I'm gonna get my answer yes. And if you look at the scriptures, there's one, I don't know how to say these names, it's Balak and Balaam. It's in Numbers 22. So if you just read that chapter, it just kind of talks about how God's initial answer was no, and eventually he kept asking and was willing to go outside of God's plan for him. And so then eventually God's okay, whatever. And so it's sometimes God's consent doesn't necessarily mean God's approval. Another example is actually in Doctrine and Covenants, and I haven't read this. A friend just told me about it. Joseph Smith was asking about when is the end of the world happening, and God is I'm not going to tell you. And then he asked a couple more times, and then God was oh, well, it'll happen when you're 80 or something like that. And so it's kind of the same concept of if you keep asking and not accepting that answer, God might let you believe another answer where let you, I don't know, do whatever you want at that point in time. But it doesn't mean that is from God. That doesn't mean that God's approving of it. It's just you weren't willing to accept his answer. And I kind of felt that way with getting married. When I prayed about it, it was kind of the same thing, that I got a no. And it wasn't a hard no. It wasn't some angel came down and was don't do this is stupid. But looking back again, it was a no, and it wasn't something that I liked. And so in my head, I was like, well, God just didn't give me an answer. But then, like, looking back through the years, I was like, yes, he did. He absolutely did. The answer was just no, and I just didn't like it. And so, yeah, that is one thing that, just based on that alone, like, I gotta know, like, the Book of Mormon has this, like, money back guarantee, pray about it, and it didn't work. Like, the thing that it promises didn't work. So that's I don't know, not a deal breaker, but it's definitely something that shook my faith, I guess. Also, just the way you get answers to prayer is kind of like, again, I don't think it's biblical, because it's all based on feelings, and feelings are so easily swayed. So it's hard. Like, I don't think that you can tell just based off that alone whether something is, God, or if it's just how you feel. And I think that a lot of Mormons will mistake feelings for the spirit because that's the evidence they have. They don't have, like, physical evidence for anything. It's just like, oh, I got this burning in my bosom. I had spiritual confirmation, is what they say. And yeah, and I think it just, like, crosses over into every other aspect of life. Like, I heard, like, teachers talk about girls and be like, oh, I bet she's Mormon, she's so beautiful. So it's like this outward beauty, like physical appearance, is something that they're mistaking for the spirit. And I've done that too. Like, somebody's been charismatic and they'd say something, I'd be like, oh, I just felt the spirit, and later on I find out they're, like, doing heroin or whatever. Like they're probably not, like, a man of God. Like, maybe they had the spirit at that point, but they're probably not a man of God. I was just probably, like, swayed by my own emotions, because I was Mormon, and I was taught to believe my own emotions over anything else. And then second, I don't know, people make you feel things. Emotions are swayed. And so I think that when you're praying and when you're asking, like, emotions are great, whatever, we have them for a reason, but we need to be going back and, like, checking things, lining them up to the Word of God, the Bible, making sure they're true, instead of just going off of what we feel in our hearts. And I think that like, going off of feelings, again, a Mormon thing. And I think that if you look at the fruits of that, it's, like, not good. Like, I had, like, she was my landlady, and she'd just always be like, God talks to me all the time. Every time my car breaks down, it's because, God doesn't want me to go these places. I'm like, no, your car's, like, 40 years old. Like, you haven't taken care of it. Your car is breaking down because you need to buy a new car. It's not because God doesn't want you to go to the store. Or, like, I had a roommate who would be like, she's dating this guy for, like, a week, and was like, yeah, I prayed about it, I got the feeling, like, I'm gonna marry this guy. And then they broke up, like, 2 weeks later, and then the next guy is the same thing. She did marry that one, so, good on her. But, like, it's the same thing. Like, God told me, like, I heard in conference talk that we were supposed to get married, and we both looked at each other and we just got the feeling. And so it's like, you're so swayed away from reality because you're taught to just base it on feelings. Another one, my ex-father-in-law, he heard a voice, in his mind, not a voice, but he heard a voice telling him to marry his wife, and my ex-mother-in-law. And so, like, that sounds like a big thing. That sounds like, I don't know, that sounds like, a big deal, right? Like, you hear a voice, like, but it's like a mental voice. When you talk about, when you, like, press it, it's like, oh no, not a physical voice. It was, like, in my head, but it was really, really strong. So, like, I knew I was supposed to marry her. But God never said to him in all his years of bad parenting, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't give drugs to your 9-year-old kid. Like, maybe not. So you can hear voices, but they're only for things that you want to happen. Like, God's not as active as, like, in things that matter, like, screwing up your entire child's life. Like, it just doesn't set well, I guess. Also, another thing that bothered me is, like, so bishops. So when I was like questioning my marriage and, like, wanting to get divorced, like, bishops with their direct line to God through the priesthood would always be like, yeah, no, you shouldn't get divorced, like, marriage is, like, sacred, like, stick it out. And then, like, as soon as I stopped being Mormon, like, let go of that, then it was like, I don't want to give this any more of my time, I don't want to give this any more of my energy. It was wrong when I got married, and the right thing to do is to undo that sin. It's not to stick with it. Like, that's not how this is working. And so, like, I feel like not only does Mormonism teach you the wrong way to see prayer, it also, like, sometimes intercepts when you actually get answers to prayer. And so that also bothers me. So yeah, those are just things that bother me. So yeah. So I'll make another video next week that actually has like, I don't know, facts and figures and quotes, not just like my feelings and opinion. But yeah, that's thing 2 that bothers me about Mormon.